Boy, Nintendo and Sega sure do get along nowadays, don't they?
Wrong!
You may have everyone else fooled, Nintendo, but I see through the lies. You've been trying to destroy Sega ever since the beginning. So, before Sega took away their video game monopoly, Nintendo had so much in the bank that they could bleed money for eons with no problems. This meant they could pursue impractical and costly console add-ons that Sega would try to imitate. Internet connectivity and CD add-ons were intentionally made to lose money, knowing Sega would do the same. And do the same they did. This put Sega into a not-so-great spot going into the next console generation, but Nintendo knew it wouldn't be enough. What they needed was more competition to choke out Sega. So everyone knows the story of the original PlayStation. Nintendo made a deal with Sony to develop a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo. They went behind Sony's back to work with Philips. Sony then developed the add-on as a standalone console just to spite Nintendo. Unbeknownst to Sony, however, this was all part of Nintendo's plan. They decided Sony was the best candidate to be an additional competitor in the console market. A competitor Sega couldn't afford to compete with. Nintendo waited until development on their add-on was far enough along that the only reasonable option once they went to Philips was for Sony to release it standalone. And to ensure the PlayStation didn't end up like so many other failed consoles, Nintendo crafted the N64 in such a way to ensure Sony's success. Everything about the N64, from its use of cartridges which had less memory, poorer sound quality, and were harder to develop for than the CDs the PlayStation used, a controller that is so ridiculous I literally couldn't even think of a joke for it, and textures that look like they're rendered on toilet paper were purposely done to drive away third-party support. And it worked. Many of the big third-party developers ditched Nintendo to work with Sony, which gave them the support they needed to succeed where others had failed. All thanks to Nintendo. The pressure was on for Sega. Not only did Nintendo have enough first and second-party support to guarantee they had enough games to still compete, but they still didn't have to worry about actually making money. Another console competitor was nothing to worry about. While Sega, after the several add-on blunders Nintendo had led them into, had to make the Saturn a success. The looming release of the N64, along with the hot new PlayStation, put Sega in a tight spot. In an attempt to get a head start on the competition, not only was the development of the Saturn itself rushed, resulting in an overly complex system, but they forewent proper marketing and release announcement, which ended up majorly backfiring as some major retailers like Walmart and Best Buy ended up not stocking Saturns as a result. The Nintendo-induced panic ended up dooming the Saturn from the start. And while Sega tried their best, after fumbling around for 4 years, they put an end to the failed Saturn to bring us the Dreamcast. And while the Dreamcast was no slouch, with Sega bringing a lot of great innovations and new series to the table, the stiff competition Nintendo created with the PlayStation only got worse with the PlayStation 2, which in 2001 spelled the end of Sega as a first-party developer. Nintendo had won. Sega was out of the console game. But that wasn't the end of their plan. They wanted to ruin Sega's credibility. And to do that, they had to go after their mascot. Sonic was next. The next stage of Nintendo's plan required them to play the long con. They had to get friendly with Sega, and when Sega started developing sequels for many of their IPs on Xbox, Nintendo knew they had to act fast. They started porting fan-favorite Sonic titles to the GameCube and developing all new Sonic games for the Game Boy real quick. Right out the gate, they cozied up to Sega. They set up the illusion that all that console war business was behind them. Just water under the bridge. Sega games being released on Nintendo hardware became commonplace. Heck, Sega even made new IPs exclusive for the GameCube. For an entire console generation, Nintendo played nice with Sega. And then, in 2006, they made their move. Nintendo knew that with the next console generation just around the corner and Sonic's anniversary coming up, Sega would want to do something big for the Blue Hedgehog. This is where Nintendo's plan would culminate. In a continuation of the faux friendship they built during the previous generation, Sega were among the first developers Nintendo sent Wii dev kits to. This was to ensure Sega would attempt to release their next big Sonic game on their console as well. An attempt Sega did. The next big Sonic game would of course be Sonic the Hedgehog, or as it's colloquially known, Sonic 06. The game was designed to thrust the series back into the mainstream. The primary platform was to be the PlayStation 3, with an Xbox 360 port to market towards the Western audience, and a Wii port to seal the deal. Then Nintendo's gift of an early Wii dev kit came in, and it became apparent just how underpowered the system was. You see, the Wii was purposely made to be an overclocked GameCube with a motion control gimmick stapled on it in order to keep it from being flopped. The system being a runaway success was just a lucky coincidence for Nintendo. The plan from the beginning was for the Wii to not match up to the PS3 and the 360. This made porting Sonic 06 to the Wii a logistic impossibility. It just wasn't going to happen. But due to the goodwill Nintendo had shown them, Sega felt obligated to return the favor. If they couldn't have their next big Sonic game on the Wii, then they would make an all-new Sonic game just for Nintendo's system instead. In order to have the release of this new exclusive Wii game that eventually turned into Sonic and the Secret Rings coincide with the console's release, a disastrous decision was made. The 06 team was split in two. Half would stay on 06, and the other half would begin work on Secret Rings. This naturally led to a myriad of problems with development. Calling it a mess would be an understatement. Cut content, cut corners, the whole thing was a fiasco. Nintendo had successfully sabotaged Sega's killer app without anyone even noticing. Yuji Naka leaving Sega in the middle of development was also a blow to the game, but even that doesn't compare to the dev team being cut in half to accommodate the drastically different horsepower being worked with. Half a team just wasn't up to the task in making a full game in the time they were given. How has no one seen it before? It's so obvious. Sonic 06 was Nintendo's fault. They planned the whole thing from the beginning. The cut levels, the cut playable characters, the cut voice acting, it was all part of the plan. A plan that had gone better than they could have possibly imagined. 06 crashed and burned hard, and Secret Rings didn't fare much better either. Sonic 06, and by extension Sonic in general, would become the internet's punching bag for the better half of a decade. No matter what came later, no matter how good the following games were, 06 sucked. So Sonic sucked.
Sonic was never good.
Yeah, it was a 25-year lie.
I think we're at the
Real
point
talk.
where we need to admit that this was never really a great franchise.
Nope.
Every review for years to come had to start with some diatribe about how Sonic's had it rough for the past few years, no matter how trite it became. Even more than creating the PlayStation to knock Sega out of the console market, this was Nintendo's greatest victory over Sega. But it still wasn't the end. Much to everyone's surprise, but especially Nintendo's, 06 didn't spell the end for Sega's little blue gumball. Sonic just kept on kicking. So Nintendo, in classic Nintendo fashion, kept acting friendly and started scheming again. More Nintendo exclusive Sonic games, even some good ones. As far as Sega was concerned, 06 was a fluke. How could it possibly be Nintendo's fault? So in their blissful ignorance, they continued to play into Nintendo's hands all over again. Nintendo once again made the decision of releasing a console that, power-wise, feels like it's a generation behind, but with a gimmick stapled on to make it sell. Gosh, I wonder what their plan is. As not to make their motive too obvious this time, they waited a bit before trapping Sega. In 2013, Nintendo made a deal with Sega to make 3 Sonic games for the Wii U. And to ensure Sega couldn't get out of it even if they figured out what was going on, the deal was exclusive. Sega couldn't release Sonic games on another platform until the deal was complete, which had other unintended side effects like the Taxman and Stealth ports of Sonic 1 and 2 only being released on mobile. The timing of the deal was such that Sega couldn't allocate development to 3 games without detracting quality from either one of the exclusive games or the inevitable anniversary title. To mitigate the obviousness of this plan, Nintendo allowed one of the 3 games to be Mario and Sonic's next Olympic outing. However, Nintendo knew that their false show of goodwill wouldn't be enough. Sega had to cut corners somewhere. In an attempt to not do just that, Sega had development of the upcoming Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric moved to the Wii U. The concept of Sonic Boom itself was actually pretty good, except for Knuckles' design and Sonic dressing like a sandbender. And having Rise of Lyric be the final Wii U exclusive to finish off the deal sounded like a good idea. Since Big Red Button was developing the game rather than Sega themselves, it wouldn't take development time away from the mainline Sonic games. They had seemingly escaped Nintendo's trap without even knowing it. But it's never that simple. Big Red Button were quick to realize that their game, which was made for Xbox, PlayStation, and PC, didn't work on the Wii U, because the Wii U didn't support the CryEngine. Big Red Button was tasked not only with finishing their game on time, but also getting it to work on a console that didn't support its game engine. But the deal had them trapped. They had to make the game for the Wii U. Nintendo had got them. Even with direct help from Crytek, they barely got the game running and barely got it finished on time, with many of the planned features being cut. The release and subsequent reaction was a disaster. It really was the second Sonic 06. with the reception to match. If people didn't have a game to point to for years as proof that Sonic sucked before, they definitely had one now. Nintendo had once again pulled the rug out from Sega, and left Sonic's reputation in shambles all over again. And so, the truth has been revealed. Nintendo has been systematically destroying Sega for over 2 decades. Every misfortune that's befallen the company was carefully crafted by Nintendo. Forces was on the Switch? No wonder it wasn't good. The best versions of Sonic 1 and 2 stuck on mobile? Blame Nintendo. Shadow has a gun? Thanks, Nintendo. Ken Penders gets the Sonic comic cancelled? Nintendo's idea. Sonic Runners dying? Nintendo's fault. Sonic Boom doesn't get a 3rd season? Definitely Nintendo. Sonic's original movie design? Nintendo. How will they sabotage Sega next? I'm not sure, but you can be sure that I'm going to be there to figure out how they did it. But what do I know? I actually like Sonic the Hedgehog.